People always say this, hosting's dead, shared hosting's dead. Nonsense. Look at the number of new businesses that are still starting, the number of new websites that are still being created, and there's loads of different ways to adapt. And there's so many new things that are happening that you can take advantage of, like AI, and see it as a threat, or you can say there are really exciting things that we can do, and look what it's going to do for like business enablement, people starting new things.
I can already congratulate you on what you're building.
It's like a relatively badly kept secret. By the time this released,
everyone knows.
We'll have launched hosting.com. So yeah, thanks for the congratulations. We've still got a little bit of work to do before we launch. So I'll take congratulations for the things we're about to do. We're a private equity backed business, and private equity gets a lot of bad rep, sometimes fairly, but it shouldn't, because private equity just means that your pension, my pension, have an investment in something like a hosting business, and hosting is a good investment for a pension fund because while you might not get rapid growth, you typically protect your investment and you get cash at regular intervals. But the thing with private equity backed business is it brings a lot of understanding and rigor and analysis of the decisions you make.
My guest is Seb Lemo, CEO and founder of WorldHost Group, currently one of the fastest growing global web hosting providers with over 30 brands, hiring over 900 people across the globe, serving over 7,000 customers and over 2 million websites. WorldHost Group has recently closed the A2 Hosting and FastComet acquisitions, and now the hot topic is that they have just announced their new brand, Hosting.com. We are talking about Seb's beginnings in the industry, WorldHost Group and their new branding, industry changes for the last 2 decades and trends, M&A, private equity and its impact on the industry, and much more. We have recorded so much valuable content with Seb that I have decided to split it into 2 parts to not overwhelm you with too much at once. The second part will be available in a couple of weeks after releasing this one, so stay tuned. Before we start, just a quick announcement. To continue evolving web hosting today, we've recently opened up for sponsors. So a big shout out to our first diamond sponsor, Blackwall, infrastructure security designed for web hosters, engineered for engineers. All our sponsors and supporters are helping our platform to grow. If you'd like to join them, feel free to reach out. Okay, Seb, thank you for joining, for finding the time. I imagine it's not easy managing such a company and having 1.5 hours to record a podcast with me. And also, we are recording this before you announce hosting.com, but we will release it once it's done. But I can already congratulate you on what you're building up. But before we get there, before we'll be talking about it, let's start with you and with your story. How did you get into the web hosting industry? What were your beginnings and how did it happen? You are the CEO of one of the fastest growing hosting group in the world.
Hey, Conrad. Yeah, let me just get my head around this just a little bit. So we're about to launch, as of me speaking right now, we're about to launch hosting.com, but it's like a relatively badly kept secret. But by the time this releases,
everyone knows.
We'll have launched hosting.com. So yeah, thanks for the congratulations. We've still got a little bit of work to do before we launch. So I'll take congratulations for the things we're about to do, and we've got to do over the next few days before we launch it. But yeah, great to be here. Nice to be on a hosting podcast and talking about hosting. How did I start? So like lots of people in this industry, I started 20 years ago playing around with computers in my parents' house and accidentally started running a hosting business. That kind of grew. And so I built up a UK-based hosting brand. The first one was called VidaHost. There was one called TSO Host, which I ran along with some others. And we created a group in the UK called Paragon Internet Group. We went through the process of all the things you do as you mature a small business. We built a data center. We were relatively unexposed to the things that you would expect people to be exposed to. I mean, the understanding of how like finance worked or debt or equity, any of these things, we kind of just accidentally grew into a great little business. I exited that in 2015 to a European hosting player called Host Europe, and along with some of the team at Host Europe, who I'm working with again now, I did a small buy and build of 10 companies or so. Buy and build, when I say buy and build, I mean we acquired a few other hosting businesses and we brought them into our fold in 2015, 2016. in 2017, GoDaddy acquired Hosts Europe. I'm not the right fit for GoDaddy. I stayed for a little while to help the guys merge some brands in together, and then I left and I retired for a couple of weeks. And after I retired,
Couple of weeks, not much.
I had this grand plan of reading loads of books, and I've got a farm in the countryside. I thought I'd just sit, like read, relax, and 2 weeks later, I was kind of fed up, itchy fingers, thinking, I've got to do something, and started doing things again. And after that, I started a few different businesses, a few different startups in various spaces, but all really around hosting. Started a pub, run a campsite, all sorts of, like, lots of things, but then kind of came back home, as it were, to running an actual hosting business again. I still enjoy on a Sunday morning waking up, having a coffee, and seeing what's been happening with customer support. So I kind of missed that as someone who'd done that since I was 16 or 17. So got back into that when I realized that people really still weren't running good hosting, and what I started there kind of morphed quite quickly into World Host Group.
Okay, but that's actually not unique. A lot of people are coming back to hosting. There's something in this industry that allures people. So for you, was it just the feeling that you're providing something to the customers, or what was it?
Well, I think there's a few things, and I think it's an interesting thing to unpack, because lots of people in this space started in the hosting industry about the same time as me. There's lots of people around the same age as me, or both of us. When did you start in the hosting industry, Conrad?
Yeah, I came from the software side, so it's not exactly the same approach. Like I had a little story with a hosting company back in 2017, maybe.
Yeah.
But I was more the programmer who got into the business by coincidence,
Yeah.
and also stayed because it's there's so much into it.
I think maybe in software and development, or basically in the early web, it's kind of the same story, is that people didn't come in intentionally thinking, this is what I do. I'm going to build this. This is my business plan. This is, lots of us started when we didn't really have too many of life's responsibilities, and the barriers to entry were very low, and the competition was pretty poor. So you could really run a business by just working hard and providing great service, and kind of being ahead of the competition, just like technically.
Exactly.
But yeah, there are things that the way that's worked, and the way that we kind of, not just me, but lots of people did this in the same way, kind of has shaped the businesses we've grown. That we built businesses that have been very service orientated. We built businesses that have been maybe not so focused on marketing rather than on tech. I mean, I listened, as an example, I listened to your podcast with Brian, who worked with A2 hosting, and Brian was talking about how he didn't hire marketing people until much later. He just hired.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with lots of people, because you look at things like what are the things that are important, what are the things I understand, and then you scale those. And so the true answer to your question is probably, why did I come back to hosting, and why people stay in the industry? Probably because we know the industry very well, and we don't really have the experience to do much else, because I work now. Half of my job is hosting, really, and half of my job is like finance and dealing with investors and M&A and things like that. And that's super interesting, but it's not. There's no way I would know that unless you're exposed to it. And if you were starting a new business now in any other field that you didn't have like 20 years of like inherent knowledge about, you would have to come up with like plans and models and all of this stuff that we never had to. Like, we built no experience with this.
But it also means that there's something that you still can do in this industry, that it's not really stalled. There's still opportunities that you can chase.
There's still opportunity. I mean, there's still people always say this. There's hosting's dead, shared hosting's dead. Nonsense. We look at the number of new businesses that are still starting, the number of new websites that are still being created. Like, it's super exciting. There's loads of different ways to adapt, and there's so many new things that are happening that you can take advantage of. Like, the AI is just, you can see it as a threat, or you can say that there are really exciting things that we can do, and look what it's going to do for like business enablement and people starting new things, and like all of that. And look at sure, in the UK, in the US, maybe even the US now, like we speak on the day that there's just been a load more tariffs coming
Oh yeah.
from the US. So maybe the US is not the most exciting place, but look at India, look at Africa, look at South America. You've got amazing growth. You've got some countries where I think Nigeria has 200 million people in it, and there's like 3 million websites. The opportunities are mind-boggling. It's just, how do you position yourselves in order to take advantage of those things? And in some of those, you can, in a really developed economy like the UK or Germany, every business pretty much has a website. And so you're competing often with other players in order to get those customers from them or move an existing website to you. But in other countries, you're educating people in that, like, what you need is a website. You don't need a Facebook page or a WhatsApp business profile. So the challenges are different, but the opportunities are huge. I mean, massive.
Let's talk about World Host Group. Can you
so
bring a little?
I started World Host Group. So I had a small hosting business in the UK called StablePoint, which I'd set. So going back a little bit, so I started a WordPress maintenance business called Fix.net, and the idea was that we would maintain websites for sites, because I knew that in the hosting space you had lots of customers who would have malware on their websites, or they would need maintenance, or they would need like small changes done on a website. Those things were too big for a standard hosting company to do. It would be beyond the scope of support, but they were too small for a web developer to do. The developer didn't want to do those small changes. They wanted to sell projects. So we kind of sat in the middle of those two entities doing maintenance and doing like small changes on a subscription based, and pretty rapidly. It still grows pretty rapidly. It's now part of World Host Group. But when we started that, I said initially I don't want to do hosting, and I think I still had a non-compete from the previous business I sold. So we didn't do any hosting on the Fix.net. But eventually we realized, look, the biggest reason that people come to Fixed is because the hosting's terrible, and so we'd have all of these people on like Bluehost having issues. And so we said, well, look, people come to us saying the website's slow, and what are we doing? We're saying, look, the problem is not your WordPress site. The problem is your web hosting is not very good. So you should be moving web hosts to a different provider. And then we realized that lots of providers just are awful, and people would fall for the marketing and say, well, look, they've gone to this hosting business that's paying an affiliate loads of money, but actually we're just trying to solve their website problems, and it's making it really difficult for us to solve their website problems. So that's when we thought, you know what, we should just start offering hosting ourselves because we can do it better. So we then started this hosting business in StablePoint that would offer hosting initially for these Fix.net customers. And then that grew quickly. We tried at the start of that, we tried putting it on top of cloud providers. So we fell into the accident of technical founders again, where we thought what people want is they want something super technical. So they want hosting on top of cloud providers. So we ended up saying, look, you can use any cloud provider you want, and we'll run a web hosting package on top of that cloud provider, and then we'll package it up into individual accounts or into reseller accounts. Obviously that works marketing wise, but actually turns out what people want is they just wanted good hosting, and they didn't really care what cloud provider it was. And actually the image of the cloud provider doesn't necessarily correlate to what provides the best or fastest or most resilient hosting anyway. So we pretty quickly then pivoted to running our own servers. But that StablePoint was then the foundation, and we built out a really good team of people at StablePoint, and then started World Host Group relatively soon after that as a buy and build case. And the idea was to do a few acquisitions a year for a few years and build a nice decent business, but it very quickly snowballed. And so we started start of 2023, and mid 2023 we acquired in Australia a business called Web Central, and we did by January 2024 we'd done something like 10 or 12 acquisitions, and then we've kind of continued that and just matured the business through those times.
Was your idea from the very beginning to just grow by acquiring companies?
No, so there's got to be a mixture for a business like us. So there's a few different parts of our value proposition at World Host Group, and World Host Group now hosting.com. So the first is scale. There's no point. We can run a really good business, but if it doesn't have the scale, then it's not that exciting a proposition for anyone. So M&A is just the best way that we can get some growth, and typically we can run a business that we acquire as good as or better than how it's run before. And that's not because we have a magic touch or anything. It's just scale, professionalism, some expertise that you just don't have as a smaller business. Like, A2, for example, is a brilliant business, has been a brilliant business. But did A2 have the scale to have data teams, or to have tax structuring, or this, or the marketing expertise that a bigger business can have? It doesn't. So we're able to do that at scale. So M&A is a key part of it, and it's the key part of how we grow. Almost all of our growth comes from M&A. The second part of it, though, is organic growth. So taking businesses and growing them organically, both in terms of revenues, but also in terms of customer volume. So what we see everywhere in hosting businesses is there's typically even though they might have revenue retention through ARPU or price increases, there's often net customer churn, i.e. customer numbers are declining every year. But what we're working very hard on is turning the businesses we acquire around and giving them net customer volume growth, as well as ARPU growth, and seeing what else those customers are interested in buying from us. But that's another key part of the proposition. And then the third, probably the biggest thing that we spend our time on, is narrative. Like, how are we telling a story? What's the story we're telling as a group? Obviously, the big story is we are building a global hosting brand to rival the big players in hosting.com. And what do we turn that into? That isn't a company that is a typical hosting service hub, so hosting businesses have often been, come here, this is where you buy your domain name, this is where you buy your cPanel hosting plan, this is where you buy your email hosting or your website builder. Much more turning hosting.com into a product. So we're an ecosystem. So when you're a hosting.com customer, this is where you're in our portal to manage all the different things that you want to do. We're going to be your partner for business success. We're the people that you call. We'll solve your issues, and we're much more of a one-stop shop rather than somewhere which then you come into and then we send you off to different partners. And so telling that, and we're doing that not just in one jurisdiction, but we're doing that globally, and we're able to then take in businesses that have grown for 15 years before, and then bring them into our ecosystem and develop them further and professionalize them. So narrative's a key part. And then the fourth thing that happens behind the scenes with what we do is tech debt reduction. So a huge amount of our time is spent sorting out legacy. So sorting out things which have been around for 15 years and no one's had the guts to deal with them or the ability to deal with them. And sometimes we try and quantify how much of our time and effort would be involved how much time and effort we would save if we weren't doing this. And it's huge. So for example, the Web Central, the business we bought in Australia, it's a big business, 30 million revenue or so, this Australian business. And it had email platforms that were running on LDAP, which is a technology, I think, from 2000s, and using Java Corba, which is, and I don't know anything about Java or Corba, as a way of interfacing with the LDAP mail clients on a billing system that was also written in Java. That was run by a very good team, but was just well past its due date. So from like a purely financial point of view, it might not have made sense to do anything with it. It might have made sense to just say, we'll keep that in maintenance mode. It runs, but we know that's not the recipe for long-term success. And we know that if we don't deal with that stuff now, at the rate that we grow and the rate that we bring more things in, we would drown. So we aggressively deal with tech debt. So huge numbers of migrations, huge number of platform moves, huge number of billing moves, getting everything into one system, because the key for us is we can leverage the scale that we've got because we integrate. Because the way that we run things in the business is that everything is horizontal. So the way we run something as simple as like abuse. If you have an abuse complaint against any of our systems, it comes through to a central team who deals with things centrally and doesn't have to things around to anyone else, and they've got full visibility and full control. And the same with like our virtualization platform. So we buy things that are running on VMware or virtualizer or Virtuoso or OnApp, and so we just say, well, all of that we have to move to our standardized platform, which is Proxmox platform, because if we don't, we're going to end up with 200 different virtualization stacks, and we'll never fix it.
All right, so you're very active in converting those let's say legacy systems. So it means that you're also unifying everything, right? Does it also mean the hardware upgrades?
Almost always. So and it depends what for. So we pretty much replace everything.
It's all on Dom. Is he dealing with all this stuff?
Dom has a team, but yeah. So Dom and Thomas, who lead our tech teams, are pretty busy. But we have a team spread across the world. But yeah, lots and lots of migrations and lots of hardware purchases. And then the hardware purchases are partly because we're often buying businesses that have rented servers, or where the systems need replacing, or where we want to do data center moves anyway, and we'd rather buy new hardware and migrate over the wire than we would do a lift and shift. Especially, some of the things we inherit are really well run. A2, for example, was super well run, whereas others you don't even know what the thing in the rack is. Like sometimes you have like billing records for 100 servers, and there are 120 servers powered on, and you're like, well, this is going to be and the routers don't have passwords. Like just like there's a lot of puzzle making and untangling.
Yeah,
we're maybe slightly more adventurous than other consolidators, and we quite.
It sounds like
we quite enjoy this, but we definitely like solving these problems. So we don't. We're not going to sit on something and not fix it. We have to fix it.
All right. So, but does that mean that you will be unifying all the infrastructure for hosting.com across all your brands and putting them under one umbrella, or is this something that on the technical level will be unified, but the brands will stay?
It pretty much is behind the scenes anyway. So with a few exceptions, any brand that you come to in the World Host Group setup is the same platform behind the scenes, with the variations you expect. Some of them have different servers, some of them are different specs, obviously, but it's not like there's two different data centers, or it comes into the same interface, the same teams supporting these things. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to do the things that we can do, because the things that we can do rely on the fact that we can treat things as a whole, because that's how we unlock the stuff that we can unlock. It's like looking at the data for all of the brands in one go, building out things that can support everything in one go, rather than saying, okay, we're now going to deal with this silo, and then we'll deal with that silo, and then we'll deal with that silo.
All right, so that was on the technical side. What about people, and what about how do you manage all of that? How do you, like, let's say you are buying A2 hosting, right? But it's suddenly, let's say it's like 20% more people in the company, or something like that. Like how do you manage all of that? What's the process? M&A process can be structurized, as we also have the experience. It's a process, right? But incorporating this, and now you have a different team in a different location with different procedures and all of that. How does it work?
Yeah, so the people is a challenging part, and the challenging part is maintaining culture of both your business, i.e. the business pre-acquisition, and the business that's acquired. There's a few key things that we stand by. The first is that we're transparent and open. So we're not trying to mislead anyone, and we're honest with people on acquisition about the opportunities and the risks, and the questions that we haven't answered yet. The second thing is that we are growing quickly and we don't have the right answers all the time. We're always trying to find the way to get to the truth. And so we move quickly and we work with people to help us to try and find those right answers. And the third thing is you have to have the approach that we don't have like that monopoly on that truth. So if the acquisition we do has things that are better than what we have, that's what we adopt. In general, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, so let's kind of go thematically. So in terms of care and overall culture as a whole, we're about 900 people right now, and we are mostly as a business office based in terms of care. So we have different offices around the world. We generally find that at the speed we move, office work is way better because of the knowledge sharing and the fact that people can see promotion opportunities, that they can learn from the people next to them. It's also much more secure. So we have to deal with things like VPNs. I mean, that's kind of obvious. But the businesses we acquire sometimes aren't office-based, and therefore we have a mixture of office-based and remote staff. Because we have offices everywhere, I mean, it's pretty much breakfast time in an office somewhere in our company. Because we have offices in so many places, even though people are in offices, we are effectively a remote organization. So we have to work in such a way that as if we were all working from our own homes, just because, you can't, you're dealing with people from around the world all the time. And so we're, I think, pretty good at maintaining that culture and building that culture globally. We still have a long way to go in terms of building and doing some of the things that improve a global company culture. So we've made some amazing hires in this space. So we've just hired a brilliant chief people officer called Anya. And she's coming in basically in her first challenge is how do we upskill leadership throughout the business? So team leads, supervisors, office leads, how do we develop them as people within the business? So we of the 900 people, we have maybe 50 leaders throughout the business, 50 experienced leaders, and we want to say, look, how do we the next 100? How are we upskilling the next 100 so that they're able to take on responsibility as we keep growing? So yeah, so care culture is important. Care obviously is you can kind of see how care does from data. In terms of technically and those other like technical finance operations, things like that, I like to say that we're for 50% of the people that come and join us from an acquisition, we're brilliant because we're very meritocratic. We work very hard. Don't really think too much about structure. So if somebody wants to work hard and prove themselves and is technically driven and wants a challenge, probably would be the best thing that could possibly happen for them. Because we can take people who might not have seen many career opportunities and give them brilliant career opportunities. At the same time, for maybe not another 50%, but certainly for a few people, we're not a great fit. We are very intense. If you just want to work for a paycheck, we're not the right place. But we're generally open about this, and we generally say to people, look, this is what we are. We have great opportunities, but be prepared to work hard. And generally we're open, and that culture kind of works. It's worked for us so far.
Ambition is your value that you put through the entire team.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think it's excitement. Definitely, there's ambition. It helps that we're growing so rapidly. It helps that we're building a global brand. I mean, the fact that we're able to take people that have joined us through acquisitions and say, look, we're World Host Group, welcome. By the way, next month we're building hosting.com and we need you to help us because X, Y, and Z needs to happen is super exciting for people. Like what we've been able to do in building this brand out and doing that globally is like for some people in in our organization, like it's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, because it's also, like you said, when you have a growing company itself, it means an opportunity for people that want to grow. It's not something that you can get hired for randomly. So being in a company like this, it's giving them a lot of
I think,
options.
Conrad, one of the things that I always thought this one of the things that I really value very highly in this business and also the last business I ran was the approach to knowledge sharing. We don't have politics here, and I haven't had politics in my last businesses. And the reason I think that often happens is because people are scared that somebody's going to take their job from them or someone's fighting them for their opportunities. Whereas what you really want is you want someone who needs help to say, look, I need help with this, and for other people to say, here's what I suggest, here's how I can help you. And I don't know, I can say that these things are due to maybe the culture that we instill or things like that, but probably in truth it just comes from the fact that when you're a growing business and exciting things are happening, people see opportunities. And so yeah,
Perfect.
ambition absolutely is part of what we're doing because of our growth.
So going back to hosting.com, you've actually answered my question about what it is, why have you created it, how is it different from other providers? What do you think will be the future of hosting.com? And maybe asking it from a wider perspective, because as you said, 20 years ago, web hosting was a different type of business. Most of the guys, like you said, and like you probably also did, was just set up a cPanel server and start,
Yeah.
making some websites, putting some websites for your friends, family, then for local businesses, and mostly grew organically. So how did the industry change? How do you think what should be the approach for the web hosting nowadays, and what do you think will happen in the future, and how is hosting.com positioning to that?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is what I said earlier. So historically, hosting businesses have sold infrastructure. They've been they've sold I mean, at best, they've offered great customer support and really well managed infrastructure. But they've got to turn into product businesses or like a brand, an ecosystem, which is what we're doing. That's much more than the things that they're selling underneath. So the vision for hosting.com is really about we are the most trusted business partner that these global small businesses and larger business, but mostly global small businesses can have online. And so it's about what's the entry point? Is it domain names? Is it a website builder? Is it an email account? And then what are the other things that someone needs in order to be successful online? And how can we help them? And how can we help them in these different locations? And that's not just about like selling them services or selling them products. It's also like how can we help their business grow? Like how can we connect people together? Can we leverage the scale of our client base to be able to push people's businesses when they're using our platform? Things like that. So that's really the long-term future or the long-term plan for hosting.com. In terms of a brand, we do a lot of research now on global hosting brands, and there are two that really stand out, and I don't need to name them. You know what they are in all the markets, GoDaddy and Hostinger. And
Yeah.
you look at what they're doing and how strong their brands are, and you realize there's a lot of like just work, understanding, research of the customers, understanding of individual countries. Like the brand translates, there's consistent tone, there's consistent messaging. All of this stuff takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, but really works. Hosting businesses until now have been able to not do that sort of stuff. But for a hosting business to grow and to do really well, they have to, like we at hosting.com have to do the work and build a brand and understand our customers and really better than those guys because they've got such a big advantage. One of the things I find quite interesting is quite important to us is going back to the narrative we talked about is how our business looks from the outside. We're a private equity backed business, and private equity gets a lot of bad rep, sometimes fairly, but it shouldn't really, because private equity just means that your pension, my pension, have an investment in something like a hosting business, and hosting is a good investment for a pension fund because while you might not get rapid growth, you typically protect your investment and you get cash
Yeah.
at regular intervals. But the thing with a private equity backed business and maybe other invested businesses where you have a structured board and you have like reporting, and we obviously have debt, so we have debt covenants and bank lenders behind us. It brings a lot of understanding and rigor and analysis of the decisions you make. And so we, for example, we look at a lot of different M&A deals, and some of them are for really sizable businesses that in themselves are very good, but if you layered them on top of our business, wouldn't look so good. So an example would be if a business was declining and was declining from a lot of revenue, you could layer it on top of us, and then it might make our business look worse, because even though our business might be growing, that declining business would offset our growth. So even though we might be able to buy that business at a good value or integrate it really nicely, the narrative it would change on the business would be very different.
But do you mean the narrative from the end customer point of view?
No, I mean from an investor's point of view, from a financials point of view. Ultimately, we, like lots of other consolidators, are building hosting groups in order to be large blue chip pensionable things that your pension fund might buy. And so that's what's driving a lot of value in the hosting space, is that when you put together hosting businesses that are of a certain size and a certain professionalism, and you have the things around them that you would need, so like financial reporting, tax advice, audits, those the sort of legal advice, the sort of hygiene things, then they become the sorts of things which are perfect for a pension fund.
So you cannot afford buying a shitty business, in other words.
Well, we love buying shitty businesses, right? Because we love buying shitty businesses because they're easy things we can fix. Not that there's, but putting it in a slightly better way, we like businesses where there are solvable problems, because that solvable problem is something we can do easily better than was there before. And if, like, we've bought very few shitty businesses, but a really shitty business is a great opportunity for us because it makes our life easier fixing it.
If it can be turned around, right?
But there are certain businesses which may or may not be shitty, but because of their size or their history or the fact that they might have been left alone for a few years, might be things that, if we were to turn them around, would take us so long that it would be a detriment to our business as a whole. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense. That's why I also ask about the end customers, because if you bought, let's say, a large recognizable business that has a bad reputation, customers would see the whole group as worse because of that. So you also cannot afford that. So it's also from the end customer point of view, it's kind of similar to the pension funds.
Yeah, there's lots of balance. Like, similarly, if let's say you bought a business that had super low pricing for customers, for example, you might think that a business like us could come in and see that as an opportunity because of the low pricing, we have the capability to increase prices and get more revenue. But you would also have to balance the fact that in us increasing prices, we're causing reputational damage to a brand, even if we're only increasing the price to what the price should have been in the first place, right? There are no like easy answers to this, but all this stuff has to be analyzed. And another, like, just back to this rigor point, another accident of like how hosting has grown up over the last 20 years is like the modeling of how these things have been sold is quite like immature. Also, like, things are still sold as hosting package A, hosting package B, hosting package C. And if you were to compare that to every other, like, what other look at software, like if you look at, I don't know, HubSpot or something like this, like the pricing does not fit into like package A, package B, package C. And if it does, it might just on the face of it, but there would be all sorts of things that you would be bundling in or changing. And we are, like, me and you, we're super thankful for some of the software, everything from PHP to WordPress to cPanel to WHMCS. Some of the software that's been built has enabled us to build these businesses relying on other people's technology, but some of the way that those software has been built has like caused like us to think in certain ways and has made like a rod for our own backs. Like, why do customers think, or why do we think that emails should be bundled with a hosting plan, unlimited emails with a hosting like it doesn't make much sense, but like the hosting we sell, like lots of it just has unlimited email accounts bundled in, whereas you or you know, like unlimited all this stuff, like WordPress, like WordPress has done the same in the developer community. It's brilliant software, but people think development is cheap because someone can install a WordPress site and install 50 different plugins, and suddenly you have an e-learning system. Like, so it's blessings, but it's also like things that we have to step back a little bit and think about, you know, really, is this the right way that we should be looking at this, or do we need to like take a slightly different approach in general?